So thank you for being willing to participating in this. The idea is to explore kind of two concepts that I think is very present in the world, and kind of just like a game or a play to connect them and see what happens if we connect them, and I'm happy that you want to explore this together, and just like going on an intuitive travel to see what happens. And so it's not really kind of a classical interview where I've prepared anything, it's just like a conversation that could happen over a coffee table like that.
Okay, cool.
So, but before that, I'll just say that for the viewers, and that that I've been in a process, curious on consciousness and stuff like that. I started meditating in 2006, and I've been out and through different processes in that long process, where I ended up meeting you 2 years ago or something. Tanya, my ex-girlfriend, presented me for you, and we have spent some days together now here, looking at consciousness and traumas, and how attention and consciousness and the body, how it all works together, and exploring this. And this has been a long travel for me, because I started out as a political activist when I was very young in school, and I was very offended by the world and how it is, and I needed to change it. It was a very strong urge in me that I have to go out and change something. It was the apartheid, Nelson Mandela, that kind of started my political anger or frustration, and also a movie in the 80s about the rainforest that got teared down. And I feel it's strongest when I remember it now. So that's how that happened when I kind of created my personality. You know, you get a personality of your parents when you're a kid, and then when you become a teenager, you start to create your own personality, saying this is not me and this is me, and, you know. And I very much chose political enthusiasm, and I was more or less full-time activist for many years. And then in this process of protesting and attacking and being in opposition to things, I started realizing slowly that I had to look inside also in some kind of way. So I don't know if you know the biologist Varela. He's quoted for saying that politics got me into meditation, and it's kind of the same for me, because I ended up finding out that we can't really solve it here. There's something else that has to be solved, and I have to look inside.
Yeah.
So that has been like the travel. But then after I had meditating for years, I suddenly saw myself coming into politics again and making it a career and having good jobs, and in this situation where I had the awareness of consciousness and had a meditation practice and all this, and then I ended out kind of a spiral or a circle or something. I ended out in something very similar to earlier, but just with a new look. And this, I feel, is kind of a third wave or something, because then I quit my job and my career, and now I only want to sit out in nature and don't do anything, and non-dualism is the only thing that interests me. And now, very slowly, there's a kind of a little plant inside me that is curious on, could these different interests be combined in some kind of way? Yeah. And the combination so this is a play for me to do a combination between the word attention, which is very much what we have focus on when we meditate and do all this spiritual stuff, and economics, which was what politics basically is about, distributing resources and some kind of systematical exchange of values or exchange of something in between individuals. So there's this, one could say there's this perspective which is all is one and everything is happening inside me, But there's at the same time also a perspective that Johannes, as this body, is walking around in a world, and something is very important in this world, and it kind of seems for me, and you can correct me in this conversation if you think it's different, but it seems like it all comes down to economy very much, and attention. So I'm curious on these two aspects. So that is what I want to explore with you. And just a short presentation of you. Mine became much longer than I had thought, but so maybe, I don't know, maybe we can make your a long presentation also.
No, I don't need a long presentation.
No, but as far as I know, you have been into this facilitating processes about consciousness and attention and trauma and stuff for more than 2 decades at least.
Yes,
and
almost 3 decades.
Yeah, and so you've been really working into this, and as far as I understand your work, seen from my perspective, is that what I think you bring in, which is very unique or interesting for me, and I haven't seen it other places, is that you, for a person like me, I had some kind of openings, spiritual openings, where everything is one, and blah blah blah, and I see myself every time I have these experiences. I see myself kind of coming back to the same perspective, which is Johannes. It's a body, and it's, even though I know, and I'm less connected and attached to the idea of I and blah blah, I still act like an individual. And what is that? I think you have some good ways of talking about it, that there are some traumas in the body which keeps kind of dragging us back to this, that it wants something. The trauma wants something, and this we can meet in right now. Actually, now I remember that it would be a good idea to meet it.
Yeah. Well,
actually,
I think it's good to just clarify maybe in a few words what life is about, what we're actually dealing with as human beings. Okay. So, and let's break it down to the very basics. Okay. So, what we can say, doubtlessly, that this moment is an experience to us. Can we say this?
Yeah.
Okay. And the ingredients, how this moment is experienced, is through the thinking process, through our feelings, and through the sensations in the body. And these 3 are basically the material, the ingredients that an experience is made of. Okay? So this moment is an experience to this body, and we can feel this moment as sensations. That is the experiential part of it. Then we can shift perspective and can ask ourselves, but how do we know that we're experiencing? Who or how do we know that there's an experience happening? And in that moment our attention shifts away from the content of our experience, which is basically what we're experiencing. It shifts to that which is aware of the experience. Because without being aware of an experience, we would not be able to say what we're experiencing. So it's clear, the experience must be recognized so that we can talk about it, share it, even internally noticing, my body is constricting or my body is expanding. Okay, that knowing of the experience is a process that is facilitated by that which I call consciousness. Okay, so what we're dealing with is that this moment is an experience to this body, and then there is something here that is aware of this. Let's simplify it and let's call it awareness or consciousness.
Attention.
No.
Okay.
Let's call it
Okay.
No. Let's clarify this.
Yeah.
So let's call it consciousness, awareness. In some traditions, they call it space with the capacity to know. So different descriptions.
Yeah.
We don't exactly know what it is because we only can give it a label. But what we can say is there's something here that is aware of this moment, and that moment is an experience to this body. Okay, so that's basically pretty much everything we're dealing with. So all we're dealing with is an experience in our own consciousness, which is generated by this organism.
Yes.
This organism, scientists say, consists about 80 trillions of cells. It's like a cell community that is consistently communicating with each other, and neurons and autonomous nervous system and the hormones and the nymphs. So there's so much process happening in this body, and this combination of biology is so complex, but it actually makes this experience alive, you know? We are maybe aware of maybe 1% of this process that is happening in this moment of the experience we are actually aware of. Most of what's happening in this moment is happening underneath our consciousness, our awareness, because it's happening naturally, automatically, habitually. Okay, so the breathing, the blood flowing, the organs working, the heart beating, you know, we're not even would pay attention to it because it's like driving a car. You know exactly how it works and you let it run. Okay. So, within this setup of this moment being an experience in this body and something is aware of, that awareness is actually, it's us. Okay? That's the real us. That is that which is prior to the experience. What within that setup, there is an element that is crucial, that we mostly overlook, and that is the element of attention. Okay? What is attention? Attention is awareness focused on an object. It can be an object outside, but it can also be something in the inside. We can shift our attention towards something in the inside to become aware of it. The material, let's call it like this, the substance of awareness and attention is the same. Awareness itself is resting. It doesn't move anywhere. It is just here and it is witnessing the experience that is happening in this moment. So we could say awareness is resting, and attention is the dynamic aspect of awareness, or we could call it like the arm of awareness, that can be directed to different objects so that we can identify an object. So if I tell you, listen to the car outside on the window, you will shift your attention there, and in the moment you shift your attention,
There is no car. But
well, there is no car, but if there would be a car, you know, you would, in that moment you would noticing, you would become aware a car passing by. Without you paying attention to this, the car doesn't exist.
And I also recognize it's impossible not to check if there is a car. When you ask me,
Exactly. It's like when I sometimes do the experiment, don't think of a pink elephant.
Yeah. It's kind of impossible.
It's impossible because in the moment I'm telling you this, your attention moves there, imagining a pink elephant, and you're having the experience of a pink elephant in your mind. Okay, so through the process of attention moving, shifting, we are able to identify objects. As a matter of fact, we're creating them. Okay, so this is what quantum physics say, like what Werner Heisenberg in the 50s found out, that there's a relationship between the observer of an experiment and the outcome of the experiment. He found out that there is through the process of observing, it has an influence on the outcome of an experiment. So if you bring this paradigm further to what we're talking about, and we can see how it functions, then in the moment we pay attention, we're creating the object that shows up in us. Our mind assumes that the car out there exists before we pay attention to it, but we don't have any proof for this. It comes into existence only in the moment we pay attention to it. Correct? So again, don't think of a pink elephant. In that moment, you pay attention to it and it appears in your consciousness.
The only thing I know is actually what I experience.
Okay, so attention is a tool. It's like awareness splitting itself off, or it becomes a narrow focus in order to become aware of parts of the experience of now. So we can, through focusing, we can extract one specific aspect of this experience and put it feels like we put it under a magnifying glass and can have a closer look. We can explore it, you know. So if I don't pay attention to my hand, it's just a hand. There's an experience of the hand moving, but if I want to explore this deeper, I take the hand, I take my attention, and now I can look at this hand and I give attention to aspects of my hand. fingers
And in the moment you just mentioned hand, my hand started becoming warmer.
Okay,
and
of course, because in the moment hand becomes the center of our attention. We become aware of this to a higher degree.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not only my hand, but since I'm paying attention to my hand, something happens in your consciousness as you're paying attention to your hand, and you're noticing, oh, my hand is a little more present. Yeah. It was there before, but we didn't really, it was underneath the level of our consciousness. So through attention, we can expose a certain aspect of the experience and examine it and explore it, look at it, taste it, feel it. Okay? And if we're done with this, our attention loosens up or shifts to something else, and the hand is a hand again. Yeah. It's just part of the experience, but we wouldn't pay much attention. So that's a very important aspect, that we human beings have the capacity to pay attention in a conscious way, to explore.
And you say that you experience that attention is not connected to the body and that part of the experience, but it's connected to the consciousness.
Yes. Well, so first of all, there's awareness, and attention is a fragment, like a focused awareness, we could call it. Mm-hmm. I want to repeat this. Awareness is not moving, it is resting. Yeah. And awareness, when it starts to manifest in the form of a dynamic movement, it becomes attention. Yeah. The substance is still the same. It's like the ocean and the drop. The substance is water, but the drop is only a fragment of the ocean. Okay? Yeah. So when attention starts to rest again, what it happens is the drop returns to the ocean, and attention, for example at night, before we fall asleep, our attention gradually drops back into consciousness, and the world disappears.
Yeah. So it's kind of a door between the awareness that doesn't move and the whole physical world.
Exactly. It's like an interface. Yeah. It actually produces the world, and it makes it experienceable. Without attention, there would be only movement, but we would not be able to identify any object, neither outside of us nor internally, because we can also direct attention from an external object into an internal experience. So we can observe our thoughts, we can observe what we feel, the emotions, but we can also very gently give attention to the physical sensations in the body. Okay? So through the process of paying attention, we become aware that this body exists. Mm-hmm. Okay, in the moment, as we're doing here, we can either pay attention to the street or to the room we're in, or we can take attention and just gently bring it back and become aware of this body existing and having an experience. Mm-hmm. Okay, so by paying attention to this body, we're realizing that this moment is experienced by the body as sensations. Okay, so let's stay with this for a moment. So we're just paying attention to the physical body. And as this is happening, there's an awareness of a body sitting on this chair, having an experience. Mm-hmm. And we're talking what kind of experience you're having, simply an experience. And this experience manifests in the form of thoughts, if there are thoughts, feelings, if there are feelings, and mainly physical sensations. Physical sensations are more rudimentary, it's like constriction, expansion, warmth, cold, moving, like energy flowing through the system, or the feeling of stuck. It's very rudimentary stuff, it's not very complex. Okay, so now we talked about the simple mechanics of attention. Now, within the mechanics of attention, there are qualities of attention.
But before we go to the qualities of attention, there was one word that you used, identifying. Yes. So we identify stuff with our attention. But as you've mentioned earlier, which I think is very smart, is that identify, it has two meanings.
Yes,
actually.
Yes. So identification is like, through the way we pay attention, we are able to identify an object. Mm-hmm. But in the same time, and that's also determined by the quality of our attention, it's not only that we identify an object, but we also, when we to the quality of attention, we also can identify with the object. So that we suddenly feel like as if we are the object.
And it actually happens most of the time.
And that is a question not of paying attention, but of the quality of how we pay attention.
Yeah.
So let's explore this. So, but it's very important to understand that concept, or that the mechanics of it.
In the Danish language, we say that we become angry, for example.
Yeah.
So it's,
okay.
it's very much that we become
anger.
The feeling.
Okay. So there's two ways of looking at it. Let's explore this. So let's take that example that you bring up. There's anger. Okay. So first of all, what happens is there's an experience of energy in the body, and we give that energy the psychological label, which is a word, anger.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that's happening. Okay. So there's an energy, the label, anger. What happens is when there's a change of our body experience, from, let's say, rest to activation, because that's what anger is. The body is resting and then suddenly it gets activated. And that activation is that the whole nervous system starts to gets bubble up and have experiences, and the energy goes high, the heart starts to beat, we're starting to shiver. And depending on the activation, it can feel like anger. But the anger, so first of all, the anger starts only in the moment we give it the label anger. Because all we're noticing actually before the labeling process happens is that there's an activation in our nervous system, which means energy starts to move. So anger is an energy form, correct? That's what it is. So if we remove the whole psychology of it, which starts with the labeling, because we could also call it sadness, or we could call it Coca-Cola, it would generate or whatever, it would generate a different response. So in the moment we're removing the psychological label, there's a recognition of an activation in our nervous system. And now what happens is that when activation happens, it's very often quite discomfortable. It often is accompanied with a sense of discomfort. And what in that moment of discomfort, there's a mechanism in our system is that our attention moves to the discomfort. Okay? It wants to solve it. It wants to find out where it comes from, and tries to get rid of it to return to comfort. So it is an in-designed mechanism in our bodies that it wants to feel comfortable. It wants to return to rest, to a sense of ease. So that means in the moment discomfort arises, attention jumps on it and tries to solve the problem, tries to find the cause, tries to find the means to get rid of it, to return back to ease. That's built in. We cannot control this. No human being would consciously stay with pain. Everything, it will always try to move back to ease and peace, correct? Okay. So now what happens is in the moment our attention starts to pay attention to the discomfort, the habitual way is that our attention becomes very tight, because when the activation happens in the body, our body constricts. So the body constricts, and with that constriction, with that tightening in the body, it pulls our attention into the same tightening. So the reaction of the body manifests in the quality of our attention, which is mostly tight. It's very focused. I call it a hard focus. Okay, so
it's like a camera.
It's like a camera zooming in, zoom, automatically. And the focus of our attention follows the intensity of the constriction. That means the more painful it is, the narrower the focus gets. Is that so?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a direct relationship between the somatic, physical response in our nervous system and the focus of our attention. Very important. And we cannot control this. Try to remain open and wide when the body is completely tight. It's almost impossible to do this. So we have a direct physiological link between the response in our nervous system and the focus of our attention. That's very, very important. They are not independent of each other. That's why it is almost impossible to train. You can train with yogic practices to keep your focus wide even when you are pain, but this is not natural. I'm talking about the natural functioning of the human organism. Okay? So, in the moment our focus gets tight, how does this determine the relationship that we're having with that experience in the moment of a tight focus. What's your experience?
How determine the relationship?
How does it influence the relationship we all of a sudden have with that experience of pain?
It kind of it's everything, right?
Exactly. It makes it appear as it's only me having pain.
Yeah.
Which is, I call it a very exclusive focus, and that strengthens the feeling of a me having a painful experience, which is what we could call, we are identifying ourselves with the pain.
Actually,
it almost
we just are the pain, right?
We become the pain.
Yeah.
We identifying ourselves with the pain through the quality of our focus, which is generated by automatic responses in our nervous system. Does that make sense? So the process of being identified with an experience is not a psychological movement. It starts with a physical response in our nervous system. Yeah. And this is really revolutionary, because most of us, we think identification, I am identified with something, is a psychological or spiritual happening. It is not true. It starts with the automatic response of our nervous system, pulling the focus tight, building up a very tight relationship with that experience. It's like a tunnel, and that generates a sense of identification. Identification doesn't really exist. It only feels as if I am identified. Is that correct? Okay. So if we want to loosen up that feeling of I am anger, I am the object that I'm seeing, it doesn't make sense to trying to solve it on the level of the focus alone, because, as we said, the quality of our attention is determined by the state of our nervous system. If the nervous system responds like this, or if the nervous system responds smooth and more elastic, so that the focus remains open and soft. Can we agree with this? Okay, so in that moment, it's clear that we don't have to deal with trying to manipulate our focus to disidentify, but we can bring our attention into the physical body and explore what is the information in our body that triggers that automatic response. Okay, so we're resting and all of a sudden I say something to you that you don't like, and your body goes into a response. Correct? So it's like something is activated in you, and depending, it's triggered, and the whole nervous system starts to get into action. Okay, so according to the information in you, the nervous system will respond. We know today that our nervous system is running on information on a cellular level. That means the information that we have received, for example, in the wombs of our mothers, through the nervous system of our mother, later after we're born, the information that we have received from our caretakers, later through environmental impact, through our teachers, through whatever in our life.
What we would call conditioning.
Everything is information. Okay? Everything is information to this organism on a cellular level. And we know today that a cell runs on information. If it has a certain information, it is repeating that information. If you want to change the behavior of this body, you have to change the information. Is that correct? So it's not about changing behavior, because this is what psychology tries and other spiritual dogmas and spiritual schools try. They try to cultivate certain behavior and say, if I keep on cultivating this, it will change my physical structure. It's not my experience. I tried this for many years. And I tried to, like in America they would say, fake it till you make it. I tried to fake compassion. I tried to fake love and hope that if I do this long enough, that my body will finally become love. The actual reality is,
works for a time.
Works like a placebo. Okay, so what I have found out is that through cultivation or through behavioral change, the information in my nervous system does not change. It changes certain muscle memory. It changes certain speech areas in our brain, so that we, instead of saying I hate you, you start to express this in a more conscious way, but the feeling underneath is still the same, the charge. Okay, so it feels like we're creating a kind of false peripheral sense of self based on behavioral and cultivated behavior. We can change that, but it doesn't never touch the actual core information that we carry in our cells. That's why ultimately, after many years of practicing this, many people get frustrated because it doesn't work. They can clearly see that on the level of the conscious experience, they know how it should be, but the body has its autonomous reality. And the more we get frustrated, the more we're actually touching the trauma information, that how I call it, in our nervous system, that actually wants to heal, so that the body can develop new, fresh habits that are not cultivated, but they are actually based on cellular information, so that the body is doing freshly different, instead of being pushed into trying to be different. Does it make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So it needs a kind of cellular transformation, and if I use the word transformation, I mean more like adding information that we either did not have, or replacing old information with new information. What do I mean by this? For example, in the womb of our mothers, a very few beings have the experience of being held, of being taken care of. Simply because the mother did not know how to hold herself and how to take care of herself. Yeah? So at the moment this information is not available in the nervous system of the mother, out of whatever reason, because she has not received this from her mother, that information cannot be transmitted in the nervous system of the child. We know today that the nervous system of a child is a complete replica, bound and linked to the nervous system of the mother. That means every information that's in the mother, may it be trauma information or healthy information, will transmit into the nervous system of the child. So before consciousness, before we even have a thought, one single thought, there is already a predestined traumatization through the trauma that our mothers have. So when our mothers, for example, don't carry the information, I am held, I'm taken care of, the child receives that information on a cellular level, gets born, and starts to live on that reality. First of all, that reality is the inside experience, and it determines the body to function in a certain way. Based on the information, I'm not held. What will the body do? It will learn to hold itself. It cannot relax, but it will consistently try to maintain itself. That is experienced a constriction. So the body is like, I have to hold myself, I have to hold myself, because it doesn't have the information of, I'm held. The moment you receive the information, oh, no, I don't have to hold myself, I am held, what does the body do? It can relax and say, well, if I'm held, I don't have to hold myself. The body relaxes. What happens as the consequence of a nervous system and a body that relaxes? The focus of our attention starts to widen. I don't have to be so alert. I can relax. Because
on the beach.
It's like suddenly you're on the beach. I said, oh, the sun is shining. I can relax. There's nothing to be scared of. Our attention becomes wider. That means the process of I'm identifying myself with all kinds of stuff is loosening up, because I'm not consistently jumping on certain objects to hold myself, to identify myself. Is that clear? It starts with information in our cells. I'm using this as a very simple example.
But in my personal history, I started meditating in 2006, and suddenly that was a revolution in my life, and I spent a lot of time meditating, and I was very active in a community of meditators, and I started realizing that there's a lot of these people who have been meditating for 30 years, they seem kind of aggressive, even though they're standing and smiling and being very polite. I can feel something.
Because the body is sexy.
Really
that's
nice.
what I'm saying.
We're not really hanging out
exactly
together,
because if you're cultivating spiritual virtues, if you're trying to make the body calm, loving, you are not adding new information. You're adding new information on top of old information.
Yeah.
This is like treating a symptom. So if you go to the doctor and you have a symptom on your arm, and he only treats the symptom, you get rid of the symptom here, but 100% sure this symptom will show up in another part of the body until you treat the core, the cause. So the cause is the lack of cellular information or information we received from our mothers, and the body keeps on repeating that information. And as long as it is not replaced or transformed on a cellular basis, the body will do as if this information is the only information, and we're only putting a layer of cultivated information or discipline on top of it, and either we have to tighten up the discipline to suppress the actual information, which is suppressive, or we become highly frustrated that sooner or later we're noticing, in spite of our best intentions, our practices, our goodwill, it has not changed the functioning of this nervous system. That was, from my experience, incredibly frustrating, and I didn't know what to do anymore. I did everything. I was dedicated. I tried to behave sweet and kind and generous, all the stuff. And my body, in certain situations, it just needed the right trigger, did exactly that which it has done for the last 52 years. And I could not control this. So it was clear I needed to go a little deeper into the structure. And then, of course, you start to discover that these automatic responses of our nervous system are mainly triggered by our reptile brain, which is the oldest part of the brain, which is basically a defense mechanism. And when certain information that is existential for this organism are touched, the system moves into survival mode. It tries to make sure that the body survives, which is basically what happens in all these cases when our core traumas are touched. Because a core trauma is like a nucleus that started, it is the trauma of our mothers that later became the trauma of the embryo. And what happens in the body of an embryo is that every time the trauma is touched in the mother, the whole full impact of this is going into the nervous system of the child. The only difference is you have a matured nervous system and you have a completely young, innocent nervous system without any conditioning. So imagining when a trauma is touched and this full load of energy transmits in a young nervous system, that the body of this embryo will make sure that the body will not die. So what it does, it will develop any form of physical resistance against the opening of the trauma to make sure that the body of the baby will not die in the womb of the mother.
And that's basically the beginning of the personality.
And that's already the beginning of the physical battle that happens on the level of the cells and nervous system that later on manifests in a certain personality that I call a peripheral sense of self. So the peripheral sense of self is actually driven by physical resistance against opening of the trauma so that the trauma can heal.
Yeah.
And that generates so much pressure in us that sooner or later we're developing unhealthy habits, unhealthy behavior, simply because we cannot cope with that pressure anymore.
Yeah. And that kind of comes in lineages or families or tribes. So
of course, it's like a generational trauma structure that started hundreds of years ago.
So the trauma structure in Somalia will be different than the trauma structure in Denmark. So, so many of the conflicts that we have are actually different kind of traumas.
Yes, of course, they're actually
meeting each other.
They're also creating whole societies, Like if you go to Brazil or to a South American country, because they have a completely different historical traumatization, and the way their political systems, for example, that's why you find so many dictatorships in South America. Why? Because South America was invaded. So in their cellular structure, there are conquerors that came to exploit. So since the trauma is not healed, the trauma consistently keeps projecting it outside and creates dictators that exploit the country. It is the continuation of a deep collective traumatization that has not healed yet on a cellular level, so it keeps projecting this itself outside and creates dictators. Or military juntas,
And
people.
right now there's a global integration process where every tribe is actually integrating into each other, and that's of course creating a lot of tension.
So I mean, we're moving a little bit away from attention, but
actually I would like to make this move because my attention came to that you were looking at the watch, and I know that you have to do something.
Yes,
in
5 minutes.
In 5 minutes, okay. So normally you would go with you, we would go into what is the quality, how could I use my attention in a more qualitative way. But actually I would like to go another place, because people can see other videos with you if they are curious on that. I'm curious on the aspect that we share or we exchange attention all the time, all over. It's like today is one of the first sunny days in the spring in Denmark, and I realized that a lot of the girls, they take off their clothes. You know, it's not even warm outside, but they take off their clothes immediately. And short skirts, a lot of skin, out of showing skin. And it's obvious that they want attention, because it's not because it's too hot for having a lot of clothes on. That's not the case, not yet. So there's some kind of exchange of attention going on. They want attention, and I.
But it starts somewhere else. I mean, it would be really interesting to explore this. Probably we won't be able to do this in this video, but there is again a neurological link between attention and how our bodies learn. And they found out a couple of years ago, but 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, an Italian neuroscientist found a new species of cells in the body. And they call them mirror neurons. Mm-hmm. And mirror neurons are all over the body. It's a new cell type that they haven't discovered before. And these mirror neurons have the following function. They mirroring an external information back into the nervous system and copy that information. So the fact that the girls, when the sun is out, are starting to work around with t-shirts is not because they want attention. It is because one cell recognizes sun coming in, and what happens is from that moment on, through paying attention, other girls' cells copy that behavior. We know today that's like a chain reaction. So one girl sees another girl with a t-shirt, and these mirror neurons, through paying attention, they reflect that information into their own nervous system and say, aha, so I'm copying this. I'm also going around with a t-shirt. Mm-hmm. That's actually, so we know today that our nervous system is not learning through repetition, which would be, but through copying. Mm-hmm. We know today that the human organism learns through copying. So when I pay attention to you, which is basically giving you information, your nervous system, these cells, take that information and reflect it into your own nervous system and make it your own. At that moment, your nervous system copies me. You're copying me. Mm-hmm. You be literally on a cellular level, you become me. That means the information I'm sending out to you is, in the moment your organism is reflecting this back into itself, which is the functioning of these mirror neurons, you become a copy of me. That's why we can feel the same at the same time. This is compassion. Mm-hmm. So they call them even the cells of compassion, because they found out that these cells enable us to feel the other person as our own experience. And
so that's the social mechanism?
No, it is a process of attention.
Okay.
Because through attention, I'm giving your nervous system information. Mm-hmm. So if I, for example, give you attention that is angry, your nervous system experiences a response, mm-hmm. reflects that information back into itself, and you will respond angry. Mm-hmm. You become my anger. Suddenly we're both angry. When I give you attention, if I'm transmitting information through the quality of my attention by I like you, I'm gentle with you, your nervous system detects that information, reflects it back into itself, and becomes soft. You feel my quality of attention as your own response, correct? Mm-hmm. So this is through the quality of attention we're actually transmitting information, and that is translated by these cells into our own nervous system, so we become the experience of the quality of attention we are receiving. Mm-hmm. That means I have the capacity, through the way I'm looking at you, to change your physical structure.
And you wouldn't
vice versa.
Yeah, of course. And you wouldn't say that the case is that these women that take off their clothes, it's just an example, but it was...
on the surface it looks like they want attention. No, they're copying each other.
Okay. So it has nothing to do with male attention?
No, nothing.
Because, yeah.
The door's opening.
Okay. She's coming. Okay. So I would really like to continue this talk another day. I hope you because we're only just coming into what I'm curious on.
Yes, of course.
The social interactions and stuff like that. So
let me quickly open.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sorry. Come.